And I want to say once again a special thank you to the people that are on YouTube, whether you're here directly, wherever you're at. I just want to say thanks. I also want to do a special shout out to some of our vendors sponsored that are helping us with this whole pay what you can initiative that we are doing. One of the people that we are working with has a tool called Ping Castle, and this is a free and paid tool. It's by Networks. They purchased this company, and they are one of the supporters of the Pay What You Can initiative. So if you can do me a favor, could you please, if somebody could post a link to their Twitter account, and if we could have everybody, or Blue Sky, or LinkedIn, or wherever, if we could say thank you to them for making this possible, I would greatly appreciate it. The next group that is helping us is Arnie Bellini, former CEO of ConnectWise. A little bit of background. If you guys could do me a favor, you could jump on LinkedIn and just send Arnie a personal message saying thank you. I think he's only on LinkedIn, to be honest with you. But I met him at a conference in Florida, and we were just sitting around and we were talking, and he's just talking about trying to train people in information security, and what does that look like? And I'm like, oh, I'm doing these pay what you can classes. We're getting thousands and thousands of people through. And he looked at me and he said, well, if I could fix one problem for you, like what would that be? And I didn't know who the hell like Arnie was at the time. And I'm like, we have problems with our labs. Like it's all VMs, downloading it, getting it all set up and getting it working is problematic. And like the next day he finds me at this conference and he goes, I'm an investor in this company. Now they have labs, and it's all available to your students for free. So when you're doing these labs and you're doing them in Meta CTF, you guys should take that opportunity to say thanks to Arnie for helping make that happen. So please go out there. Like this stuff isn't possible unless we have like a really cool like posse of people working with us. Hold on, I got another one that is really cool. I want to cover this. If we go to Wild West Hackin' Fest Denver, this is what's coming up next week. Just really, really super cool sponsors that we have there. And I want to call out Barricade as well. Barricade is a company that's just been with us for a long time. And like I said, go out and let Arnie know he's not here. He's got important things to do. But if you can let Barricade know, I'm pretty sure that they're out on Twitter as well. Say thank you to them as well. So if you can please let these sponsors know, we got Ping Castle, we have Arnie, and we also have Barricade Cyber Solutions, who are just fantastic. So please, please, please reach out and say thank you to them for helping make all of this possible. Because it does, like I said, truly takes a posse for this all to happen. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started by talking about egress traffic analysis. So what we're looking at here is we're starting to kind of move into some things that I'm going to be honest with you. This is stuff that I wish that every single SOC person knew how to do. This is something I wished every MSP did. This is something that I wished every computer security professional does. And yeah, there's a little bit of selfishness, and I'm not a completely unbiased individual whenever it comes to this topic. And you'll see that here in just a few moments. But I want to talk about the importance of looking at what is leaving your environment. Right? What's the quote from Depeche Mode? You pay your debt to karma, you party for a living. What you take can't kill you, but be careful what you're giving. And when we're looking at what's leaving our environment, it becomes incredibly important to try to detect that C2, to try to detect that malware, not necessarily always looking for like ransomware, but you're looking for the attackers that want to dwell and do damage. Right. So MITRE and Egress, MITRE attack framework has all kinds of different egress techniques. And I'm going to tell you that most of the vendors that are out there today cannot detect these things. And there's a number of reasons for that. I think that one of the main reasons is a lot of vendors are really stuck on signature-based detection, where they want to go through and just write a simple signature, tell us what the bad IP address is, tell us what the bad URL is, tell us what the bad domain is, and then we'll just create a filter for it. But when we're looking at advanced adversaries, like if you're looking at SolarWinds attack and you're looking at what Russia has done over the years, they're doing a lot of really advanced techniques where they're bouncing their traffic off of known good sites, content delivery networks, and blending in as much as they possibly can in things like Google Mail and Twitter and GitHub and Salesforce as well. So when we're looking at this, it all boils down to the need for visibility. And once again, I think that, I don't know if I have it in my webcast that I'm going to be giving, but at the end of my webcast, I have this, the last slide is, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do about all these problems? And one of the things I say is, I believe education is the solution to every single problem that mankind has, right? I don't care. Like, I'm, we're talking about politics, it's education, right? When we're talking about, dealing with technical challenges, it's education. We're talking about computer security, it's education. We're talking about kids and making bad choices, it's education. It always comes back to education, right? And when we're looking at this, I believe that we are slipping because we're being sold a lie by many of the vendors that are out there, that if you run their tool, it's going to fix everything, right? There's a great quote in the movie, The Big Short, where Mark Baum is talking about fraud. And he says, the problem with fraud is it never works, right? It never works. People keep buying into fraud. Like, here's a get rich scheme, right? We're all going to buy cryptocurrency. We're all going to buy gold. We're all going to buy invest in savings and loans. We're all going to invest in the housing bubble, right? Like, you have all of these different fraud things that show up, and a whole bunch of people get into it, and then everything burns to the ground and everybody gets hurt, right? And I think that we see that replicated in computer security. And I think we see it repeated again and again and again and again with vendors, where vendors see our desires, they see what we think we need, and they're like, well, I'm going to sell you a product that does that. But it doesn't do that. It's a lie. It's fraud. And they're like, yeah, you don't need people trained. You don't need people to understand, because we're going to have next generation firewalls. We're going to have intrusion prevention systems. We're going to have AI that's going to be watching all of these things, and it's magically going to stop all of these different cyber attacks. And it's all a fraud. And at the quote of Mark Baum, at the end of Mark Baum's quote is, it never works. And we see that again and again and again. And human beings will absolutely buy a lie well and truly before they're willing to sit down and understand the truth. All right. So the visibility and understanding what's going on in your network, understanding these things at a very core level is critical. And when you're looking at network traffic, right, we kind of begin by looking at things like NetFlow. NetFlow is a proprietary standard that was created by Cisco. All right. So Cisco creates the standard, looks at all the traffic flows where you can see the source, the destination, the amount of bytes received. You can see all of these different things in the NetFlow traffic. We're at like NetFlow version 9 now, and it's great, right? Bunch of statistics quickly became the standard. Usually you have an exporter, that would be like your firewall, your router, your switch, an importer, which would be many times your SIM, and then analysis is also done with the SIM as well. Yeah, people are talking about Wild West Hacking Fest Denver. I love Deadwood. I love Denver. I'm super excited about Denver, but Deadwood is where it's at. I mean, Deadwood is like 10 minutes from my house. We go all out. We take over the entire town of Deadwood and freak the local people out. Like, there's tons and tons of computer security professionals here, hackers here. It's funny because we run the town out of alcohol quite a bit. The first hotel that we did, we told the hotel, hey, computer security community drinks like a lot. And they said, oh, no, we can handle the motorcycle rally. There's nothing that you guys can do that'll touch us. We ran their bar out of alcohol the first night. Now, I don't drink anymore, right? But I love it whenever the people at Deadwood are just basically like, who are these people? What is going on? And then I love it whenever they point out that no one is touching the slot machines. I'm like, because you're surrounded by people that understand math, right? All right. So NetFlow, it's awesome, except for a couple of quick things. First, different implementations. When you're looking at the concept of time, right? When was a network connection? It may seem like a really, really simple answer. It's like, when was the network connection? But some of the devices will mark the network connection at the beginning of that network connection. Some of the devices will mark it when the FIN packet is sent, like the ASA router that we looked at the other day. It marked that timestamp with the FIN packet. Some, and I'm not joking, they will take the beginning and the end, and then they'll just average that and pick the point in the middle. Some Cisco devices will mark it at the beginning, and then around noon, they'll mark it at the end. Time is a weird thing in the way it's actually implemented and saying that something happens. So you see lots of different implementations, and you also saw a number of different companies saying, no, we don't want to implement NetFlow. We're going to create JFlow. We're going to create TFlow. We're going to create SFlow. We're going to create our own flow to compete with Cisco. And I don't know if anybody has the standards XKCD comic. And I think that nothing articulates that better. Somebody's going to bring it up here in just a second. Nothing articulates that better than that XKCD comic. And we have a question that pops up, but what logs do I need to have? And we're going to get to that. There it is right there. Situation, there are 14 competing standards. 14, this is ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Yeah! Situation, there are now 15 competing standards. And that is something that we see again and again and again in computer security. It can be network traffic analysis standards. It can be something like compliance standards, right? Like, how many different compliance standards are there? Right? We have compliance standards like NIST, NIST 800 series. We have the Center for Internet Security, which is what I subscribe to. We also have ISO standards. We have HIPAA standards. We have PCI standards. We have all of these different security standards because everyone creates their own. Doesn't help anything. It's absolutely insane. I honestly think it's a conspiracy and a jobs program. All right. So the standard that I like the best, all right, the standard that I like the best, okay, is Zeek. And the reason why is Zeek is not tied to any specific vendor other than Corelight, who's the company that builds these high-speed appliances. And Zeek itself is actually open source as well, right? Is there a difference between standards and frameworks? If you're looking at it the way it should be, is you have a standard. It says this is how things should be implemented. And then you have a framework of implementation on the technical components of implementing that said standard. It's very similar to the idea of policy, processes, and procedures. Okay. So if we're looking at policy, process, and procedures, a policy is we bake pies. If we're looking at the process is the ingredients and the instructions for baking pies. The procedures are the step-by-step instructions on how to use a mixer, step-by-step instructions on how to use an oven, step-by-step instructions on how to use a blender. Does that make sense? So if you have a standard, that would be like a policy, and then you'd go one step down to the process, that would be the equivalent of the frameworks. Just had to reach out and grab that little sans like circle on my back, that little ring, and just give it a pull, didn't you? Right? Yeah, it's just like, and now we're going to be talking about standards, processes, and procedures. And I just rattle that crap off. So I haven't taught for SANS in years, and I still remember that stuff. I still close my eyes and see SANS slides. It still happens out there as well. All right, so let's keep going. There's lots of consistency with Zeek, huge user base, right? And I think that that is incredibly important for us when we're looking at it. You're trying to get help. You're coming up with ways that people can make it work. It's awesome. Many devices will handle those timestamps differently. Zeek handles it just perfectly, right? It's going to be very consistent. And that consistency, you can argue about whether or not it's right or whether or not it's wrong, but consistency is absolutely key. We're moving away from the standard signature-based detection where we're just trying to find an evil string in packets because there's so many ways to obfuscate. So that's why we created Rita. Real Intelligence Threat Analytics. Now, the goal of this particular tool was to start getting away from standard signature-based detection and trying to do behavioral-based detection of traffic anomalies that are happening regularly in an environment as well, right? So it looks for beacons really, really well, but it also has a bunch of other cool things like denial list checking, DNS views, long connections. All of it's for free. Is there a good reason? Oh, yeah, there is a good reason why it's named Rita, and I'll get to that here in just a couple of moments. So let's talk about what it's doing. How many of you are sick and tired of the artificial intelligence, machine learning snake oil that's out there? It seems like every week it's like, oh, this does AI, this does AI, this does AI. It's so bad. It's so bad, you guys. It's so awful. Now, how many of you are sick and tired of vendors whenever you ask them about AI and machine learning and they just flat out can't tell you? They're like, well, that's proprietary. That's not something we can share publicly about what we're actually doing. We can't. Oh. All right. All right. So I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to explain what Rita is doing. Okay. And I'm going to explain it from the perspective of like machine learning and how that ties into AI. And then you tell me if I explained it okay. Does that make sense? All right. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So we're going to start by talking about how does a human being identify that a chair is a chair? Right. In this question, you guys can answer this. You guys tell me, define chairness to me. And this is something that absolutely freaked out Plato, right? When Plato was looking at things, Plato was looking at things through the concept of like the idea of a perfect form. And when we're human beings, we're in a cave and we're seeing shadows of a perfect form, and we're kind of just kind of making guesses in the dark as far as what something is, okay? So let's take a look at a chair. All right, let's take a chair. Ace, 4 legs and something to sit on. I have 3-legged chairs. Right? I have a 3-legged chair. So that definition of a chair is broken. All right. What other definition do you have of a chair? It has a back. Some chairs have backs. Some chairs don't. Right. And you can get into the difference of what is a chair and what is a stool. But you would say in a Venn diagram, a stool is a subset of a chair. You can see how this gets really, really complicated. And it turns out that many things that you look at are very, very, very complicated and we take them for granted. All right. Another example is what's a tree? Define a tree for me. So if I start out with a sentence, okay, and I say, my wife and I were walking through the trees. At this particular moment, everybody that's listening to that statement has wildly different ideas as far as that setting and what my wife and I are doing. Okay. If you're looking at it, I say, my wife and I are walking through the trees. And my next sentence is, in the middle of winter, all of a sudden, everybody's view of the trees changes, usually to like aspens or some type of pine tree, right? If I say, my wife and I are walking through the trees on the beach, all of a sudden it's palm trees. And palm trees are incredibly different from conifer trees. They're incredibly different than deciduous trees. And if bushes were trees, the trees would be fallen, right? So whenever I'm talking through all of this stuff, right, when I'm trying to break this down, trying to define something is incredibly difficult, and it usually requires context. All right, does that all make sense? Is everybody with me so far? Okay. Another point on this, if you want to read something that's fantastic, either everything's a fish or nothing's a fish. The point is trying to define something like a fish is really, really difficult. Okay. So what we're doing with Rita is we're trying to identify beaconing traffic in network connections. So what you do is you take the concept of chairness, right? And all of you are right. Whenever you're defining a chair, it has a back. It has a flat spot where you can sit. It has 3 legs, possibly 4 legs. And you take all of these characteristics of what a chair can be and you weigh them. Okay. So you're going to create weights. If this thing has 4 legs, has a back, it's like 98% a chair, right? We're looking at multiple characteristics of what can define and be a chair. And rather than coming up with an absolutely perfect definition of a chair, good God, guts, that is a funny gif. When we're talking about these chairs, you can take multiple attributes of what a chair is. And the more of those characteristics that exist, the more your intelligence as a human being clicks and says, that is a chair. But there's a point where all of a sudden it doesn't become a chair anymore at all. And that gets weird and crazy with humans and kids. Like they can pretend anything as a chair, right? I mean, it's pretty crazy. Humans are awesome that way. Can talk more about that here in just a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to use that same concept of what defines a chair, and we're going to define it with a beacon. All right. So if we're looking at a beacon, three of the things that we analyze is consistency in interval, consistency in data size, and consistency in connection time. All right. And I want you to pretend at the center of this flux capacitor is a value of 1. And the closer the interval, the connection time, or the data size gets to that value of 1, the higher the weighting value is that we give it. Okay. So does that make sense to everybody? We're looking for consistencies in intervals, consistencies in data size, and consistencies in connection time. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Awesome. 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 Now, notice two things. None of those characteristics with the white dots hit perfectly in the center. Nothing got that value of a perfect 1. Also, if you're looking at it, there's clustering where there's some slight variations within those intervals. There's some slight variations within the data size, and there's some slight variations in the connection time, but they cluster. All right. They cluster. All right. So when you're looking at it, we can define these things in a variety of different ways. So let's go through and let's use an analogy. How many of you have small children or you've been around small children at some point? The flux capacitor keyway it's the triangle thing on the slide. If you go and look up Back to the Future, the flux capacitor kind of looks like that. All right, so you've been around kids, right? Some of you have kids. Awesome. I'm happy for you. My youngest, senior in high school, about to graduate, right? So I've been through a lot. Now, have you ever been around a conversation with a child where the child goes like this? Mom, 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 or dad, 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 dad. Anyone have that conversation? That is a beacon. All right. We're looking at the interval. Mom, 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 mom. Yeah. Yeah. It's got that consistent heartbeat. It has that interval. All right. Also, it's data size. MOM, 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 MOM. It's the exact same data size. The amount of time in that connection, in that conversation, is the exact same thing. Again and again and again and again. So if we're trying to identify that beacon, there's multiple attributes to the mom, 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 mom that looks like a beacon. Okay? Is everyone with me so far? I want to make sure everyone gets this because this is super important. All right. Awesome. Fantastic. Now, when we're looking at this beacon traffic, right, we're going to be looking at that interval. We're going to be looking for those connections in the environment that exhibit these behaviors. Now, how many of you, and I hope that none of you have ever said this, how many of you have been around people or you have said, my kids are a genius. Little Susie, little Billy is a genius. They're just so smart. They're just so smart. Yeah. Now, some of you may or may not have done that. And I just want you to know, no one cares about your kid. And I'm saying that like I love my kids dearly. I really, really, really do. But I also came to the conclusion relatively early that no one else cares about my kids. And I know this because I put them through various school systems. We're not going to get into that. Not going to. So whenever you're around somebody that has a kid that is actually like a real genius, cue references to the excellent movie Real Genius, they're not like just sitting around being like, yeah, they just got a straight A, grade average. They're awesome. They're in all these sports. They're perfectly well adjusted. That kid's not a genius. They're not a genius. They're bright, incredibly gifted, wonderful kids. They're not geniuses. You can always tell the parents of kids that are like really like on another level of being a genius because their kids usually drive their parents to smoke. They're like, okay, so like yesterday, little Billy We had our living room. We completely cleaned out the entire living room because Billy was constantly taking everything apart. He took apart the DVD player. He took apart the TV. He would take apart like my husband's PlayStation. He completely took it apart just to see what was on the inside of that particular like PlayStation. I got that PlayStation for my husband. I got that PlayStation for him for Christmas, and now it's just destroyed. It's in tons of little pieces. Then he wanted to know what the laser looked like. He was taking it all apart. So we took everything out of the living room, right? Just thinking we would put just the toys that little Billy wanted to play with in that particular room. And Billy would play with that toy. And then we could take that toy out. And then we could have some peace. We could be over in the den. We could be over in the kitchen. We could be someplace else. We could leave Billy alone. But no. Oh, no. Yesterday, Billy's in the living room. He's playing with Legos. That's the only thing in the living room. And all of a sudden, my husband and I hear pop, 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 pop. And we go into the living room, and there is Billy tearing the trim off of the wall to see what's behind the trim. Do you know what he found behind the trim? Do you know what he found behind the trim? He found our Cat 6 cable for our Ethernet around our entire house and started pulling the Cat 6 cable out of the wall. That is a genius kid. Those are the kids that sit down and they go, Mom, 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 Mom. See? They know how to do things, right? They do things very differently. And when we're trying to develop something that has the ability to detect beacons, we need to be able to detect the consistent beacons, but we also need to have something that can detect those more difficult beacons as well. So how do we do that? So one of the ways that we detect that is we look at the aggregate of all the different connections throughout a 24-hour period, and we see if two nodes are talking to each other consistently across multiple different connections. So if we have a genius, right, and it's mom, 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 but throughout the entire day, there's a consistent stream of communication between those two computer systems. We reassemble those communications and we see how they aggregate over the entire day. So an example of this would be spaghetti. Let's say I've got a string of uncooked spaghetti, mom spaghetti, because it's vomit on a sweater already. I take this string of spaghetti and I break it. If you break that string of spaghetti, it's going to be big pieces, little itty bitty teensy weensy pieces. It's going to be medium-sized pieces, but we can reassemble those and say, this is a long connection where they're going all day long. So what we do is we take these beacon attributes, we aggregate them all together, and we give them a score. Closer the score is to 1, the more likely that is a non-human beacon in an environment. Now, I'm going to get back to this here in a second, but we're going to talk about human versus non-human connectivity in an environment here in a moment. And in this particular example, you can see that we have a perfect value of 1, and we have 108,000 connections. So when you're looking at what are the things you're going to investigate first, that's what you would want to investigate. Now, you have some things that have a very high score, like 838, 835, 834. If you look at those scores, there's lower numbers of connections. There are things that beacon constantly in your environment, like Windows Update, Google Update, software updates. And usually you're looking at about 24 beacons per day or 50 or 60 beacons per day. And they're going to well-known network ranges associated with Microsoft, Google, Oracle, and things like that. And we have the capability to be able to filter those out. And I'll share that here in a moment. Now, with this, so with Rita and AC Hunter, there are no false positives. Now, back up for a second. Let me be clear about what I mean by that. I don't mean that there is no false positives and it always catches malware. But what I do mean is if it's beaconing and it identifies it as a beacon, it is non-human, consistent traffic leaving an environment. All right? All right. So when we see that, you're going to see things that are not hackers, but they're damn well things you want to be very aware of in your environment. So an example would be top left, TeamViewer breach, undisclosed breach from 2016. You have TeamViewer in your environment. How many instances of users are using TeamViewer in your environment? Do you know? See, there's a lot of environments and there's people that try to get by the monitoring detections in their environment by using TeamViewer so they can TeamViewer home so that they can watch porn, gamble, and play games on their home computer. Is that malware? Not necessarily, but it's something from a security perspective you want to be aware of. Gillette Hospital targeted a ransomware attack. This was an RDP session that was on the perimeter of an environment. The attackers were able to get some creds, fire up RDP. Your users can do RDP all day long. They don't need VNC, right? So now I mentioned VNC and you have people that are like, oh, we don't have any VNC. Good for you. How many of your users are RDPing out of your environment to their home computers? Because they're utilizing the built-in software with Windows systems that allows them to do a remote desktop protocol. And a lot of times that's built in Microsoft. It's completely allows listed. It is a great C2 channel out of the environment. Once again, not malware, but it's absolutely something that you want to be aware of. Lower left-hand corner. This is a LAN turtle from Hack5. It allows you to plug in a USB, turn it into an Ethernet adapter, and then inside of that chunky part of it is a full operating system running Linux, and then that becomes my C2 implant. We have seen environments in hospitals mainly where there's devices that don't support Ethernet adapters. They just have USB, they were wireless, and you have to shut down wireless. And they buy devices like this, and they still have the Linux kernel that beacons back to the manufacturer, and you can manage those devices remotely. Once again, is that malware? Do you want to know about it? Nuance, they're the people that bought Dragon Naturally Speaking software, where you can go in and you can talk to your computer and then it transcribes it for you. And in that software package, which is used for transcriptions for doctors and financial institutions and lawyers and all these different people out there, with Nuance, they had the ability for you to enable remote support that would connect that Nuance software package out with software like TeamViewer that gave that manufacturer that software remote access to your computer to fix the problem. Once again, not malware, but it absolutely is not something that you want in your environment as well. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find things that is not human. That is not human, and it's variable enough in such a way that we can identify it as something that needs to be investigated in an environment. Because it could be malware. It could be persistent malware. Absolutely. I'll give you some examples. You remember the SolarWinds attack, right? Sunburst and all that. Rita and AC Hunter detected that about 3 months before it was public. Now, to be completely honest, our partner in Germany is the one that founded Sekion, but they were running our software. They were doing a demo, and they detected it, and it was just like, oh, the SolarWinds box has popped, and they shut it off. They didn't investigate like, oh, this is Russia. They were like, wow, that box is hosed. It's malware on that box. So that would be an example. Another example, the Salt Typhoon. You guys, who got hit in Salt Typhoon? Anyone know who are the people that get hit by the Salt Typhoon attack out there? Yeah, telecoms. One of the telcos that got hit, they detected it with this. So a difference between Rita and AC Hunter and like your standard signature-based detection. Your standard signature-based detection is to detect bots. It's there to detect domains that are evil. It's there to clean things out. We're using this and it's designed to detect those advanced attackers. And this tool is free. I mentioned that this tool was named after my mother. My mother died a number of years ago from pancreatic cancer. And I'm getting to the point where I can go through this section without crying, which is great, but it's also really, really, really sad. And my mom worked with the finance department at Black Hills Information Security right up until the end. She was doing cancer treatments down in the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, down in Phoenix. And we would go down and she was doing some experimental treatments. Have you guys seen the commercials for Keytruda? Anyone seen those commercials on the news? She was one of the test people for Keytruda. And I firmly believe that those investigative trials kept my mom alive longer than she had any right to with the cancer that she had. But we would go down, she would do her cancer treatments, and then we would come back and she would go to sleep, and I would sit out in the hallway and I would do my webcasts and things like I'm doing today. And one couple of times she came out, she would sit in the hallway and she would talk about what she's doing to the people in the webcast like yourselves. And one of the things she requested is the tool that was named after her. I did not name it. The developers did after her because she worked with them very closely and got to know them really, really, really well. She asked that this tool remain free. because the community has been so good to us. So the heart of what we do is publicly available, and it's free, and it will stay free. We actually have over 28 patents associated with Rita, and those patents are protecting this tool so that other vendors can't come in and patent the idea of beaconing detection that we have and stop other people from doing this and utilizing Rita. So really important for me and the rest of the company, and everything that we do. If you want to know more, go check out the Darknet Diaries, the Big House. I can't remember what the number is. We've had some links out there. Episode 67. So go check out episode 67, download it, get to talk more about my mom and my dad, who is super duper awesome. He kind of helped me learn a lot about IT and computers and things like that. And I talked about him as well. All right. So when you're getting data, the lowest common denominator you can get is full PCAP data. This is data that's like the full packet capture, like we were analyzing with Wireshark and we were analyzing with TCP dump. We can take that data, we can run it through something like Zeek and Rita and get AC Hunter and get analytics out of it. When you're positioning this, you want to make sure that you're positioning it pre-network address translation, where it can see all the traffic that's leaving your environment, but it still can get the internal IP addresses of your systems as well. Now, there's a bunch of devices out there that are dedicated capture devices. Like Gigamon, Corelight, plug and play products that you just set up and then bang, you start getting packet captures to interfaces. They're absolutely awesome. They are expensive. But anytime you're looking at these products, it's essential for you to look at it from the perspective of how much time would it take for you to set up your own dedicated capture device in your environment, especially when you're talking about 5, 10 gigs. If people ask what is the fastest network that Rita and AC Hunter is deployed on, our largest customer is running Rita and AC Hunter at 100 gigabits per second. In fact, on up to about a 2 gig link, you can run it on a Raspberry Pi. It's pretty cool. It also does analysis of user agent strings. The user agent string at the bottom is making 7,659 connections, and it's like the only IP address that is using that user agent string. Whereas most of the time you'll have like a Windows user agent string for Edge or Chrome or Firefox. And malware, can you run it in a container? Absolutely, Henry, you can. You can run it in Docker. So when you're running it and you're looking at user agent strings, if you have one system that's using a user agent string that looks kind of like a Microsoft user agent string, it absolutely can run and like identify that as an outlier. Question was, I would say 1 to 2 gigabits per second on a Raspberry Pi. Also supports JA3, which is doing TLS SSL fingerprinting. When there's encrypted traffic, you can fingerprint that traffic. You maybe can't tell what that traffic is exactly, but you might be able to identify what vendor it is, what is the application on there as well. So yeah, with your Pi-hole, if you set it up with your Pi-hole, you want to install Zeek, and then you give Rita the IP address and SSH. It authenticates to it. It goes to where the Zeek logs are, and then it automatically configures pulling those off as well. Zeek, I would recommend you run Zeek and the packet capture on the Pi device, and then another device for the data analytics. You can run them all together at the same thing, but I recommend separating out the capture from the analysis. So we're really focusing on this long tail analysis where we're looking for those outliers. We're looking for those anomalies. And this is something that we do for endpoint analysis, log analysis. It's also true for network connections. Not to be ignoring these things, we also can import deny lists. Right now, Rita imports 4 separate open source deny lists of bad IP addresses and bad network ranges. And it'll correlate the beaconing traffic and see if any of that beaconing traffic is going to weird places like Shenzhou or weird DigitalOcean ASNs, and just it'll incorporate existing deny lists. I don't like running just deny lists because deny lists are kind of garbage these days. It's important that you kind of utilize them together with each other. Also, you can install it on the Security Onion. So if you're running Security Onion, you can get Zeek, Saracata, all kinds of cool things, and you can totally install Rita on a Security Onion device. And that brings us to our lab. I got my... All right, so we go to our main, and we're going to go to the Rita lab. There we go. There's a link to the lab that we're doing. You're first going to look at some of the data from Rita, what a standard HTML output looks like. And then you're going to move over to AC Hunter in the cloud at the bottom. We have this URL, training.aihosted.com. And this is a shared instance of the front end for Rita called AC Hunter. We have the credentials are provided in here so you all can log in. And AC Hunter, you choose your data set by clicking the little gear. So to get to your data set, you go dashboard, gear, and you choose your data set. And then on the bottom, it breaks out the categories: beaconing fully qualified domain name, proxy, strobes, long connection, threat intel, DNS. So if the question is about beacons, you would go to the beacons tab. If the question is about DNS, you would go to DNS. So you go to the dashboard, you load your data set that the questions are based on, and then you answer those questions as well. All right. So that is the lab. It's going to take us up to and through the break, about 15 minutes and then 10 minutes. So we're going to set the timer for 25 minutes and we will be right back. Now the system handles it pretty well from the hug of death. If you do get it acting weird, just refresh it and log back in. All right. So let's get rolling. Thank you so much, everybody. And we are back. Sorry about being a second late. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. You should be able to see my screen. All right, so I'm going to jump in and kind of talk about the lab questions dealing with AC Hunter. Underneath the hood of AC Hunter is Rita. They are the same thing. Rita is AC Hunter is Rita. It's just that Rita is the math engine under the hood for AC Hunter, and AC Hunter is kind of the visualization engine that ties the whole thing together. So let's jump into it. So when we get down to the bottom, there's some questions that it's asking, and we kind of walk through. It says, in the WinLab agent dataset, what is the connection interval for 10.10.98.30? So if I go to AC Hunter and I click on the little gear, I may have to relog in. Let me relog in. Training. There we go. Remember, will you remember me? All right. So we're going to go to WinLab agent, confirm that, and then we can see the connection interval for this particular beacon on 10.10.98.30. So let's go through what these different graphs mean and how that ties in as well. So when you're looking over here, it's basically graphing out the intervals by seconds, and you can hover over anything and it'll tell you what it actually is. So you can see here we have 269 connection at 1 second. We got 245 at 2 seconds. But if we're looking at the mode, we have 3,729 connections at 15-second intervals. So that is our mode and that is our main beacon. And the reason why you see this drift off to the left is because this particular backdoor was created by Joff Thayer, and he was specifically trying to bypass something that we see in Splunk, where they utilize an algorithm called k-means clustering. I'll go here. There we go, k-means clustering wiki. This is the algorithm that actually is looking for those clusters of patterns. And if you have a little bit of variation, especially skewed off to one side, it'll bypass k-means clustering pretty regularly to get around those. So that's why it is what it is. It's basically trying to blow around k-means clustering. Now, another way of looking at that, when you're dealing with that jitter, you're dealing with that skew that some advanced backdoors put in, is looking at the histogram over like an X amount of hours. So each one of these blocks represents 1 hour. We can change it to 30 minutes. And you can see we're looking at about 160 connections every 30 minutes, and we're looking at about 320 connections per hour. And that histogram is really flat. So Rita and AC Hunter looks at this and it says, we take all of these things into consideration, k-means clustering and MADMOM, medium average distribution of the mean, and we're about 98% certain that this is beaconing level traffic. Okay, cool. All right. Next one, a GCAT data set. What is the historic fully qualified domain name? This is a backdoor that we created at Black Hills Information Security as a proof of concept to show that many of the firewall vendors out there ignore any and all traffic that's coming and going to Google. Yeah, so the backdoor uses Gmail to basically the backdoor checks for email. If it receives a command, it executes that command, and then it emails itself the results back. And what we discovered when we were doing this is we discovered that pretty much, I don't know, I haven't found one yet that detects it, but every single firewall out there pretty much ignores all traffic to and from Google. And this makes sense if you think about it. How many of you have ever Googled a command, like, the XKCD tar command comic, right? So can you imagine if every single time you tried to Google how to use tar, it generated an alert in your firewall saying, well, John doesn't know how to run basic commands on Linux and Unix again, right? So they tend to ignore all of the traffic that comes and goes to Google. So the fully qualified domain name for this is gmail.smtp or smtp.gmail.com. There. So yeah, you actually have multiple different backdoors were installed on the same IP address for creating these data sets. There's a lot of malware in this. We only go through a little bit of it, just for the purposes of this class. There's a lot of badness here. DNSCat2 JA3 dataset. What is the domain and who's doing the lookups? So let's go into that dataset. Here we go. DNS.3, strobe agent, confirm. And then if we're being asked DNS questions, we just pop on over to DNS and here we go. So if we look at the DNS data on the left, you can see that the number of fully qualified domain names is 62,468. What does that mean? If you go to www.google.com, mail.google.com, maps.google.com, those are all different fully qualified domain names, right? Because mail is different than the web, then is different than, like maps and things like that. So to have a domain like r-1x that has 62,468, that's not normal. I know of exactly two valid situations where that might occur, and both of them have to do with vendors that are doing lookups through fully qualified domain names back to their system. So one of them would be Kimry, and Kimry, you can actually submit hashes to their DNS server, and it'll tell you if that hash is malicious. Weird, crazy thing on that. The question, fully qualified domain name, if you hovered over it, it was Google, smtp.google.com. So all of the command and control traffic, DMPT, was going to Google Mail. So that the Google Mail server was the malware command and control server. All right. Now this one is interesting because we have those fully qualified domain names on that as well. Here, let me go back to it. Okay. So if we go back here to GCAT, the histogram doesn't show that data. It's actually up here in the right-hand corner in the destination. Yeah, so fully qualified domain name is the fully qualified domain, like smtp.google.gmail.com. Gmail.com is the domain. Fully qualified domain is smtp.gmail.com. Does that make sense? It's right here. What's the difference between the two? They're just two different malware specimens and two different IP addresses. So if we go to WinLab agent, you can see that we have multiple sets. And what it's looking at is the pairing. And like I said, these are bouncing in two different ways. So they're slightly different in the way that the connection profiles look. So that's why we have two separate different looks because the beacons are actually different from each other. So So I just do the first one, and they actually are both going to Microsoft, and they're both popping up through CDNs that Microsoft provides, which once again, a lot of these are set up to bypass your firewalls. So if I'm bouncing my traffic off of Microsoft, you're not going to be able to detect me bouncing my traffic off of Microsoft if I'm bouncing off the right servers. Yes, this is an example of randomized right here. And the reason why it's able to detect the randomized beaconing is Neon Demon. If you are looking at randomization, you have the skew off to the left. That's a type of randomization. The other type of randomization is if you ever have randomization, you can never truly call it randomization. In computer science, what do we call it? Nope. Anytime we're working with computers, we have to call it pseudo-random, right? Pseudo-randomization. So if you're looking at randomization, like here, if you go to malware of the day and you look at the archives that exist within these, a lot of these are actually created with like PowerShell Empire, or they're created with Cobalt Strike. And you can put inside of Cobalt Strike, you can actually put in the delay associated with it and the jitter. So usually what you're doing is you're saying the beacon interval is going to be 10 seconds with plus or minus 20% jitter. So that means that your intervals will be anywhere between 8 and 12 seconds, is that jitter is going to be represented here. So you're going to see that you have that 10-second as the middle, but it's going to be equally balanced on either side by the like 8 to 10 and then 10 to 12, because you have 20% jitter on each side of that as well. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure that, yeah, we can detect jitter. In fact, jitter like that kicks the score through the roof because normal websites don't normally do jitter. The only example that we found that does jitter legitimately is Linode. If you go to their virtual shell and you're running a shell through Linode through the browser, it introduces 20% jitter on either side. That's because they don't want everybody hitting the API at regular intervals, so they vary it out so the API doesn't get overwhelmed. So let's go back and let's look at the fully qualified domain name count on the DNS traffic. Here we go. Here we go. A fully qualified domain name count is this column. So it says like this fully qualified domain name is there's 62,468 separate fully qualified domain name looks up. And then, sorry, domains. The number of lookups is 109,227. Now, you may have environments that have high lookup counts, but what's really, really weird is this is only coming from one host. But that may still be normal. In most environments, what is your DNS server? What is the DNS server that does DNS recursive lookups? What is it? Usually. Yeah, it's your domain controller. So you may have your domain controllers doing all those lookups, but the only system that's making those connections directly is the exact same suspect IP address. So that's how you detect DNS backdoors. So there you go. Also with AC Hunter, we have a community edition that is absolutely free that you can run at home at no charge. So, and give you an idea how good this is, I have videos of my kids trying to sneak their hands into my network closet to unplug my AC Hunter system, because I can see pretty much everything that they're doing. So if it's good enough to make teenagers freak out and try to pick the lock on the network rack in my home to try to covertly sneak in to unplug it, I'm just going to say that that's a pretty good seal of approval for teenagers everywhere. All right, so that is AC Hunter. All right, so we're going to move into user entity behavioral analytics. And this kind of builds with log analysis, because a lot of the tools that you'll use as a SOC analyst, they're going to be using some form of UEBA to identify patterns within the logs And if you get a UEBA alert, how do you actually go in and investigate that alert in the logs themselves? So why would we do that? There is no event log like, the 666 event log where it's like, oh my God, Satan's in our network. It doesn't work that way. Usually you have to look at logs in conjunction with each other across a wide variety of different attack patterns. So with MITRE, and you're trying to tie this back, it's tremendous amounts of these techniques that can be detected through user entity behavioral analytics. But once again, when we're dealing with SOC analysts that get an alert from their SIM, they're like, well, I don't know what that means. I have no idea what's going on. Let's jump into it. And the reason why UEBA is so important is because there's just so many problems with just standalone event logs. To get an entire story, you have to pull a whole bunch of different event logs together. So an example, you sit down at your computer at work, you turn on your computer, where would there be logs of that event happening? Right? So I sit down, turn on my computer and log in. Where are the logs of that event occurring? Got some people typing. Local system. Absolutely. You're going to see that system turn on. Where else? On the network. Domain controller, event viewer, your SIM. Very good. When it's booting, absolutely. You're going to see it boot when it comes. Now, where are you going to find those logs? Not just booting, but what is going to have indications of that? Think about what your computer system is connected to. All right. So your computer is connected to what if it's plugged into an Ethernet cable? I think I have an Ethernet cable here. If it's plugged in, okay, it's plugged into a switch. Great. You're going to have DHCP logs, dynamic host configuration protocol logs. You're going to have router logs. You're going to have switch logs in the content addressable memory table. You're going to have logs in the EDR where it's firing up. Great. So do you kind of see whenever you're trying to look at an event, it requires multiple logs from multiple sources to be able to fully tell you that story. Does that make sense to everybody? It's in a number of systems. So there's no one log that tells the complete narrative of what is actually happening. Also, when you're looking at the slides here, about 5% of the detects in organizations actually come from the log analysis servers themselves. So we're logging all of this stuff, and a lot of times what we're logging isn't providing us with context and what is happening on that as well. And we can blame Microsoft all day long. You can totally blame Microsoft, and I have no problem with that. You should totally do that. In fact, in my webcast, I'm going to be blaming Microsoft significantly in that webcast. But we also can blame Linux, like bash logging. I put a space in front of my history logs or my log, and it doesn't log it. Like I put a space before my command and it doesn't log it at all. That's just bad, right? Now, JP-Cert is a group of security research out of Japan. And they started researching whenever something happens on a Windows system, where all the evidence of that thing happening. And they kind of focused in on some of the kind of built-in Windows utilities like PSExec, WMIC, scheduled tasks, WinRM, WinRS. And these are all built-in utilities that hackers use all the time when they're trying to get in your environment and also do post-exploitation from your environment as well, like moving laterally. And they collected a record of like, here's the logs that are generated. Here's the prefetch files that are generated. Here's the registry keys that are generated. Here's the alternate data streams that are generated. And this was brilliant because it really showed that you don't have a single log that tells you about everything that is happening. Day 4 is you can stream it live on YouTube if you want. We're streaming live, and it will be available on YouTube. It will be recorded and saved on YouTube. All right, there's my webcast coming up in like 2.5 hours. Right. So when you're looking at this as a SOC analyst, you need to understand that your UEBA tool is aggregating a whole bunch of logs and it's trying to tell you something. But the problem with it is going back to the logs and actually investigating can be somewhat difficult. And the reason for that is sometimes the alerts are so abstracted that you're missing out the context associated with the logs themselves. And we're going to have a lab here in just a little bit. We're going to use Deep Blue CLI as a stand-in for UEBA. It's going to say, hey, there's a password spraying attack coming from the system. And then we're going to go back to the logs to actually do that analysis with the event viewer on a Windows computer systems out there as well. All right, so lateral movement. If we're looking at lateral movement, we have a standard user account. In this situation, it's SVC white noise. And SVC white noise is logged into these green diamonds, which are other IP addresses. This is bad, right? Like, unless it's a service account, if you have a user account that is now authenticated to every single system in your environment or attempting to authenticate to every single system in your environment, that's a bad day. You need to look at that and try to investigate it in a little bit more vim and vigor in your environment as well. Oops, where am I? Am I in the right place? I am not. Oh, okay, there we go. Sorry. Now, this is kind of a harsh thing. This kind of freaks out people, just a little scoochy scooch. There's no such thing as false positives. And the reason why I say that there's no such thing as false positives is because as soon as you talk about false positives, immediately it becomes something that you can ignore. It becomes an alert that you can basically just delete. So we see this happen all of the time where people are looking into, well, we got this particular alert, it's popping up, we have this thing showing up again and again and again. It's not correct, it's not accurate, just go through and delete that particular log alert. I don't like to call them false positives. I like to call them detection tuning opportunities, right? Detection tuning opportunities. These are opportunities for you to say, hey, this particular alert is firing all the time on this specific user account because it's doing something that looks shady. So instead of deleting that alert, deleting that signature, what we need to do is tune it to say, if it's this service account, we can safely ignore it. But if it's any other account that's doing it, we need to investigate it further, right? So it's a detection tuning opportunity. And I have customers from time to time, they're like, geez, we get like 100 false positives per day. How are we ever going to do that? You're going to do your job. You're going to spend literally the next 2 to 3 days tuning those alerts so they aren't generating 100 false positives a day, right? So it sounds difficult, right? But it is, in fact, something that you should be doing. Like, you should be taking these alerts and you should be tuning them all the time. Yeah. If you tune one a day, 100 days, the problem is solved. And that doesn't sound that long. It's just basically like 3 to 4 months, right? And honestly, you can tune them a lot faster than that as well. So how does things like UEBA work? Well, one of the things it does is it allows you to do stacking. I'll just give you an example. If I log into a workstation, right? I log into a workstation. That gives me a value of 1 for authentication. If I log into another workstation, I now have a value of 2. If all of a sudden my account logs into 4,000 workstations simultaneously, I now have a value of 4,000. That is something that I need to investigate, right? That's a stacked analysis. If I log off of a system, it detracts that by 1. So they can do that stacked analysis to identify what is the normal number of systems that each user in your environment authenticates to. What is the normal number of files that someone can authenticate to, and so on. The other thing that we can do is we can learn what is normal patterns of behavior. Which files do people access? An example of this would be Edward Snowden, right? Edward Snowden, systems administrator, doing systems administrator-y type things. All of a sudden, one day, he takes an external hard drive and he plugs in that external hard drive and literally downloads the contents of an entire file server. That was not normal. That should have been something that they should have been able to detect. Somebody was talking about CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike running commands from the command prompt, where it's basically saying, okay, we have somebody running who am I? I'm not all that interested. I have a slide here in a second where I'll show you. If I see one who am I command just running on one system again and again and again every 5 minutes or an hour, detection tuning opportunity, right? If all of a sudden now I have a who am I command running, and now I have a ping command running, and now I have a net use command running, all of a sudden now I'm starting to freak out. So it can look and say, here's an event, but that event in context with multiple events simultaneously occurring on a system elevates the score and that risk-based alerting that we need to investigate as well. So this goes back to that log analysis. And generally, when you're looking at Active Directory, 6 event logs are what you need, right? You've got 4624, 4625, 4768, 4769, 4776, and 4672. Now, you're going to miss some things when you're doing this. And in the next class that we have, I spent a lot of time talking about Sysmon and the importance of Sysmon and how we can use that to get much better fidelity and detail out of our systems. But these are generally the key things that you need to look at to really pull together and identify when something like this happens. Let's say that we have multiple failed login accounts, like we have 4672. We have a high number of them. We have total user accounts are 232 with 240 failed login attempts in a very tight window of time. We need to take that alert and then we need to go through and we need to investigate what are those different user IDs. And here you can see we've got Roderick, Sir Roderick, Timmy. We're going to need another Timmy. We've got Samantha. I don't know if anybody's going to get the reference, but we've got Samantha. I will kill your mother. I don't know if anybody's reading those books, but they're pretty funny. But we can go back and we can start looking at what are the actual event logs associated with this UEBA style alert. And that brings us to our next lab. Now, in this lab, we are going to do the enterprise, I can find it, a domain log review right here. And domain log review, we're going to start with Deep Blue CLI. Now, Deep Blue CLI, oh my God, Pale Horse got it. God, yeah, very good. Very, very, very good. The name of the series is Dungeon Crawler Carl. I'm just going to throw this out there. Worst covers in the history of any books ever. If I described it to you, you would say that book sounds stupid. Look at the reviews on Amazon. Ridiculously fun to read. No redeeming qualities. Like you're not going to learn anything. But check out the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. It sounds so stupid. The covers are absolutely just stupid, but it's a fun read. It's a really, really super fun read. So check it out. So in this lab, we're going to be using the Deep Blue CLI as a stand-in for a UEBA. There's no open source UEBAs that I can use in this class effectively to be able to detect these types of attacks. So that's why we're using Deep Blue CLI, because it does a lot of that type of analysis. But we're going to use Deep Blue CLI to identify potentially malicious activities. We're going to open up the event log on the systems that we've downloaded in Deep Blue CLI Master. We're going to go to the event logs. We're going to open up the DC SecLog 326 domain password spray. Make sure you're getting the right one. A lot of people pull DC1 because it has a very similar name. We're going to DC2. Okay, there you go. And then you're going to look at the event logs and you're going to identify what are the actual event logs that tie that whole story together. So the investigation for like a SOC analyst is you get an alert. Pull down the event logs, start investigating. Try to get down to what exactly is going on. All right. Let's do this lab together. All right. All right, so I've got my lab system up and running. So we are going to open up a PowerShell prompt like so. And then we're going to CD into Intro Labs Deep Blue CLI Master. There we go. Then we are going to run Deep Blue CLI and we're going to run it looking for a password spray. So like I mentioned, this is very much like UEBA, right? Like if you're looking at it, there's no specific event log that is going to tell you everything that is happening in this example. It's just, you can't say one event log directly correlates to something evil. You have to look at multiple failed login attempts within a specific period of time. That's all coming from a specific workstation and so on. But we're getting an alert. It, basically, when it does that UEBA type stuff, where it's looking at that potential password spray, we're getting 232 failed login attempts with a total number of failures of 240. So that's, as we say, bad. So let's go and let's dig into those event logs in a little bit more detail to try to figure out what is going on. So we're going to go into the event logs. We're going to go to DC2 sec logs, domain password spray. Now, this part is really kind of weird, right? Like whenever you double click this, it starts opening up the event viewer. And there's a very strong possibility that it will not open up the right event log as it opens here. So let's just give it a few seconds for it to expand and extract those event logs. All right, you can see it didn't even open up that right event log. That's kind of weird. So you got to go down and select the DC2 sec event logs domain password spray. And then we got to sort the event IDs, go all the way down to the bottom. And here you can see the actual password spray. And I like showing people this because, we're not just looking at an alert that is generated. We're looking at like, what are the event logs that correlate back to generating that specific alert, right? That is ultimately what we are trying to demonstrate with this. So you can see that we failed login attempt for Samantha. We have failed login for Roderick, Timmy, Bernice, Kyle, Jackie, Sylvia, Debbie, Nancy, Taylor, Pablo, Jim, Sherry, whatever. We got a bunch of people here. Now, how would you all like? We kind of went through this whole entire thing. How would you all like to see how this evidence file correlates to a total attack? Like, what did this attack actually look like? Would you be interested in such a webcast, such a thing as seeing this attack from the beginning all the way in? Ah, I knew I liked you all. All right, so we have a webcast, Black Hills. This particular webcast is the webcast where we walk through step by step what it looks like whenever an attacker breaks in from the outside of your environment, all the way through doing post exploitation and getting access on the inside of the environment. This is put together by Kent and Jordan, and it just kind of runs through the entire thing, right? So if you want to see what this entire attack looks like, I would greatly appreciate it if you can jump in and take a look and watch the video. Yeah, they're awesome. And we have a new attack tactics that we released last week where we walk through an entire attack. Let me do that. All right. This one is Shadow Creds. There you go. This is another one that we did, but we love doing these attack tactics webcasts where we walk through and actually show you what it is that we do on a regular basis in our environments and when we're pen testing. All right. So now you can get the rest of the story. You get Paul Harvey's the rest of the story. So you got it. You bet. All right. So now we're going to go to EDR. We have two sections left, everybody. What is EDR? And I'm so sorry for the graphic I got here, even though I absolutely love the graphic. It's like, what is the name? There's a company out there that does, is it Vaporware? They do these posters that are like the most difficult to look at posters. And they're also very depressing posters sometimes. Like they'll have a bunch of happy, shiny little critters all with sunshine, and they're like, existence is meaningless and your life means nothing. I think it's Vaporware. We'll see if I can find it. But they have posters like this that are incredibly difficult to look at for any period of time. All right. So endpoint detection and response can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It used to be, if you're looking at Carbon Black, it was just a black box flight recorder of everything that happened on that particular computer system. It's not Happy Tree Funds. I'll find it. I think it's Vaporware is the name of it. Now I gotta know. Now we gotta do. Let's see if I got it right. Let's go all. Getting close. Yeah, I might be. I'm gonna hunt it down. I've got a really good friend that got me hooked on them, and we'll do it. So We're looking at kind of extending that idea. We're getting into an intelligence, like kind of intelligence-based antivirus system, where it's not just looking at signatures, it's actually trying to dump into the point where it's looking at what is that computer system doing, correlating to other workstations, and looking at the behavioral patterns of the executables on that, not just standard signature-based detection. And a lot of times this is interacting with your SOAR product. God help me, security orchestration, automation, and response, and then of course extended detection and response. But the point is, you're trying to unify your entire like response around a whole bunch of different tools that can correlate and fuse with each other. And there's a lot of vendors in this space, right? There's a ton of vendors from Cylance, Cynet, FireEye, Carbon Black, Cortex, Cyber Reason, Sentinel One, McAfee, who renamed themselves. I can't remember what they named themselves now. CrowdStrike is probably one of the biggest ones that we see, but there's lots and lots and lots of vendors trying to sell you lots and lots and lots and lots of products, and they charge you a ridiculous amount of money out there. Now, MITRE went through and started doing some evaluations of these products, and this is going to get into a little bit of a rant. How about at the end of this rant, I throw something happy at you? Does that sound good? Trellix. Yeah, there we go. So this really bothers me because I feel like MITRE had the capability of actually doing true kind of evaluations of EDR products and their relative efficacy in an environment, and kind of did that, kind of didn't. So the whole bunch of vendors don't ever want their products evaluated truly as far as like, how can people bypass it? How do you people get around it? And with MITRE, they allowed the AV vendors to come in and they allowed them to tweak and modify to be able to detect the things that they said that they would be able to detect. And if anything was missed, they could redo configurations, which really neutered the entire exercise, in my opinion, right? It wasn't like a true evaluation. It was basically the vendors basically cheating to make their product look good, which just bothers me to no end. Because all of these vendors are basically saying that they were able to detect all the different attacks and they won the MITRE evaluations, which means it's if everybody wins, no one wins, and not a lot of value. And that kind of goes back to vendors lie. That's what they do. The salespeople out there just lie. That's, you know, their job is not to truly understand how technology works. It's to constantly lie through their teeth, try to get you to buy their product. Don't even get me started on Gartner. I should have had that on my webcast today, but yeah, it's called marketing, whatever that's worth. Yeah, like Zed, what? Yeah. So why are we doing EDR? Like, why do we even look at it? Because even though I'm saying vendors lie, EDR and full behavioral based EDR is light years better than any of the traditional signature based AVs that are out there. Just trust me on this. Like doing offensive stuff and running an offensive company, I have an entire team of people dedicated to doing nothing but bypassing EDR products. I think I have 4 people, 3 to 4 people. That's all they do is try to figure out how to bypass EDR products. And that's great, right? I mean, that's fine. It used to be, if you go back 10 years ago, every pen tester on the face of the planet needed to have that skill out there as well to be able to bypass EDR. I mean, I could do it. Anybody could do it quite a bit, but it got to the point where it's a highly specialized skill where we have developers. The other problem with it is if you're trying to do incident response without a solid EDR product and trying to correlate all of the different attacks and methodologies and isolation and all those different things, it's really hard to do without a full EDR product being able to query your entire environment as well. So this also pulls back to like Windows logs are bad. They're just bad for you. They just don't give you a lot of information. You think the application log would give information about, I don't know, applications, possibly, right? But if you really want to get solid application telemetry, you're going to have to install something like Sysmon, additional logging on your Windows computer system as well. So I'm going to talk about some free and open source things, and we're going to be playing with Velociraptor, which isn't a full EDR, but it has a lot of capabilities that you want in an EDR in an IR situation as well. So one thing, I'm not really a huge fan of vendors that don't have a free or open source version of their product. And that usually tells you that they don't believe in their product, right? So like at AC Hunter, network detection and response, they're like, oh, it's free, play with it. There you go. Have fun. Yay. Like it, great. Don't like it, great. At least you got a chance to play with it with no risk whatsoever. And a lot of the vendors are like, no, if you're going to be running our product, you need to write a purchase order with us for at least $100,000 before we put it into the environment. It's like, your product is garbage at that point, right? So there's all kinds of cool things that you can evaluate if you get a chance to get your hands on a product that you just don't just by reading vendor and documentation out there. So one of my all-time favorites is a wonderful tool called What's That? And anytime you talk to them, you have to refer to the tool exactly as I just said. If you're ever talking to anybody at a conference, you got to say, What's that? Because they love it whenever you refer to their tool that way. It is really super cool. And some people ask, it's like, why don't you use that tool in your class? Well, the problem is it requires a lot more resources than I can spin up and comfortably cover the cost of. That doesn't mean it's a bad tool. It just means it's not something I can run super lightweight for, I don't know, like 1,000 students. I mean, my classes now go anywhere between 250 to like going up. Now that's funny. I think that that's funny. Move from Elastic to OpenSearch because OpenSearch is just a fork of Elastic by Amazon because they didn't like Elastic and Elastic didn't like Amazon. And I do have an open source Elastic section in here as well. Yep, they used to do a lot of really cool inventory stuff out there as well. So super cool to kind of look at, play with it. Has bunch really cool functionality in it. You have this wonderful dashboard that allow you to look at what are the vulnerabilities in your environment, where you can see the number of CVEs for the different applications. That's cool. Also has the capability of doing standard malware detection, which every EDR should be doing, right? They should be doing that. Has the capability of dealing with like Docker or container like analysis as well. So pulling in those logs and testing it and looking and identifying what are the different attack vectors that are coming through. Another good thing. But we're going to be focusing on Velociraptor. I'm going to talk about a few more, but we use Velociraptor in this class because there is no doubt the Velociraptor is by far and away the most lightweight product I can run. Now, it's not a full EDR in the perspective of doing AV protection and stopping malware from executing on your system, but it is a full tilt EDR in like post exploitation IR. We actually use Velociraptor in some of our IR engagements where we can deploy it across all of the environments, pull all of the data back into Elastic, and then do large scale analytics for incident response. And it works really well for that. And that capability is truly the capability we want to highlight when we're discussing EDRs. How do you as a SOC analyst interact with your EDR to query individual systems? How do you as a SOC analyst interact with your EDR that allows you to run a command on thousands of computer systems and pull those results back? And Velociraptor gives you that capability. And yes, Waza and Velociraptor are both free. Now, some other vendors that I'm going to give honorable mentions to. There's a ton of them out there that have free and open source tools out there. I'm going to talk about Elastic and I'm going to talk about Komodo. One of them is Elastic. I love the fact that Elastic has the capability for you to set up like a 90-day trial where you can run the full Elastic stack on your system. I also want to throw in Huntress. I need to update these slides. Huntress has their neighborhood watch program. If someone can put a link out there, if you know John Hammond, he works at Huntress. And if you're an MSP, you can run Huntress on your own MSP for free. And I love that, right? Because you're basically looking at it. Now, EDRs basically serve as an abstraction over logs, correct? That is incorrect. Some will use log analysis, but many of them are agents that are hooked into the kernel and they're pulling the telemetry directly off of the kernel and they're doing their own analysis out there as well. So almost everyone out there uses some form of Elastic. I have my joke here at the bottom. Even Amazon uses Elk, but they renamed it OpenSearch as well. Endgame was a solid EDR. They were acquired by Elastic, and that is really what people have been using. And you can, of course, pull down Elastic for free with some limitations on that as well. We have a lab we're not going to do. It's just one of the labs that's available to you if you want to play around with it, where you can walk through step by step and how to run Elk in the cloud, setting up your own Elastic instance in the cloud, setting up your eval copy, and then installing the agent on your system, and then detecting malware. Does anyone want to take a wild, crazy guess why we don't do a full lab with like 250 people all logging in at the exact same time in Elastic? Well, it's free. It's free, but it was something we call the BHIS hug of death. You're seeing it show up here. Um, we have actually brought down GitHub in our webcasts. We were doing a live event. We had something like 1,700 people all request the exact same file at the exact same time, and GitHub went down in the United States. So we have a number of different things where we give a hug of death. So this is a lab that's available to you. You can do it, but we don't do it all at the exact same time in this course. So you can totally go through the instructions and you can do it. I don't do it with everybody doing it at the same time because Elastic basically asked me not to do that. They were nice about it, though. They were nice about it. But yeah, out of the box in under about 5 minutes, you can be detecting malware on your system and stopping it. I threw Komodo in here, and I might remove them because a lot of people aren't using Open EDR, which is kind of sad. I kind of like the way Komodo opened up their EDR to the point where it was full open source, which is really super cool. And I kind of feel bad that it didn't get as much traction as a lot of the other ones. And I feel like a lot of it had to do with the marketing wasn't quite there. But I'm going to keep it in this class for a little bit while. Now we got some people that didn't like Open EDR, but once again, we've got to give credit where credit is due. Completely open sourcing your entire code, that takes guts, right? That is pretty impressive. But the reason why I have it in this slide is because they have mad marketing on their website. So on this slide, there's something that's just like, wow, I can't believe they did that. This is the Komodo Open EDR dashboard. If you look at the malware that it detected in the screenshot, it says that it detected the malware in Splunk. So literally, they're like, yeah, we put some malware in our competitor's product. Totally was not a fluke. If you go deeper, they also have malware that they said was inside of the Elastic agent. Just I have respect for that. And I think that that's good-hearted, good-natured competition, right? I think that that's pretty funny. Now, I already mentioned false positives. It's not a thing. With your product, one of your jobs is completely around, you know, doing detection tuning and engineering. Quay said, isn't FOSS inherently less secure and insecure in additional to being unprofitable? Are you trying to trigger me? Because that statement, that's got to be a joke. That's got to be a joke because that's not true. In fact, most of the commercial software that you use out there, I took the bait, didn't I? Most of the commercial software you use under the hood is open source software. They got all kinds of things out there. So that's well done on the trolling. I'm impressed. I'm impressed with you as well. I've been nerd sniped. It's so easy for me, by the way. Like you throw out the OSI model, I'm going to lose it, right? Rip on open source software, I'm going to lose it. It's just, I'm a sucker. I know I'm a sucker. What is that Offspring song where he's basically like, I know I'm going to lose. Oh no, that would be Motor. Sorry. There's two of them. There's one in Offspring. It's like, I'm a sucker. I keep falling for the same thing. But my favorite quote on that is Motorhead. What is it? I know I'm going to lose because gambling is for fools, but that's the way I like it, baby. I don't want to live forever from the Ace of Spades out there. All right, so here's what I recommend looking at from the panic level. If you get a single repeating alert, it's interesting. You're going to have to tune. You got work to do. If all of a sudden you get multiple different distinct alerts on a system, now I'm real interested in that system. I'm really, really interested. If I get multiple different alerts and then I also have network connection alerts out there as well, the pain is just straight heroin. trying to pull me in. And network connection alerts. And then if you have that on multiple systems, this is my leveling of panic systems when we're looking at attacks and things. And ultimately, this all comes back to an architecture, right? We've got AV, EDR, we have network security monitoring, we have endpoint, SIM, and UEBA. All right, so we now have got a lab with Velociraptor. This is right here. I'm going to share the link with everybody. This lab's going to take us about 15, 20 minutes, and then I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of Velociraptor. It looks long, but you're really just hitting enter a whole bunch for the defaults on it and what you can do. But I love this lab because it shows you what you can actually do with it. All right, so let's get started. This lab is going to take us 15 minutes, y'all, and we'll resume. Let's do 20 minutes. And then I'll do a 10-minute walkthrough. We'll take a quick 10-minute break, and then we'll jump right into vulnerability analysis and close out with the last lab of the day. All right, so get rolling, everybody. All right. Go through this lab and then get into a quick break. All right, so we're going to be working with Velociraptor, and the point of Velociraptor is just to be a pretty awesome incident response tool. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of like things that you can learn in Velociraptor that are very, very similar to what you would see in a standard EDR tool. I guess we're going to be in a situation where I guess my copy and paste has stopped working. All right. So just CD into intro labs. So, and then we're going to start up Velociraptor to start the process of installationing it, installationing it, and words. All right, words are difficult. So we're going to start with the executable, and then we're going to put in config and generate I. Config, generate I. Attack I. There we go. Now, we're just keeping the straight defaults with this. We're not doing anything crazy. We're just sticking with Windows. Operating system is going to deploy it on Windows. It's going to be a self-signed certificate. We're just going to hit enter on that. Front end is going to be 8,000, setting up the GUI. WebSocket, just keep the default on that. Workbench experimental, we aren't going to do any of that. No DNS, Dyn DNS provider. We can put in a GUI, just empty to end on that. And now it's going to ask where are we going to put the logs. Just keep enter. Server config.yaml and client config. Now, what happens with Velociraptor is whenever you run this, it generates both configs from the same executable, which is super cool. Just very, very, very slick in the fact that it's the same executable that runs as a client as it runs in a server and it generates the configs. Now, most of the time, what you do at that point is you would then push out the client executable with the config for it as well. So I'm going to add in a root user. Let's see if all of a sudden I can get this to work. There we go. Now it's working. It's going to ask me for the password. The password for my system is going to be, anybody want to guess what my password was? Anyone? Tough password. Really hard password. Then we're going to run the MSI that's going to install the proper executables in the proper locations. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's weird. I think Rusty got it first. The password is password. All right. Then we're going to start up the server, and it's the same executable, and we're going to run the config for the server config, and that's going to fire up the server in the back end. There we go. It should be running. And then we're going to serve to ourselves on port 8889. I hate this. I open up Microsoft Edge and it opens up news, and I've been trying to avoid news. What the hell? Kind of some interesting anime popping up in the news. Strange. We're going to continue, and we're going to put in the password of root and the password of password. We're going to get into the front end. Is John on ping again? Yes. Yes, it appears I am. All right, so we've got the server is running, but we haven't had any clients connect to it yet. I'm going to open up yet another command prompt. I'm going to cd into the intro labs directory, and let's fire up that client, log in, get that client going. Run the MSI. Go. And then we're going to run the same executable, but now we're going to do the config as the client config that is going to allow us to connect to the Velociraptor server. I'm going to kind of keep this off to the side so you can see it throwing junk over. Because whenever we're running commands, you're going to see stuff start scrolling off over there. So if I go home, it's going to say, okay, what do we have for the client? We click on the little gear. We have options of doing all kinds of fun configs and things of that nature. We just got the standard GUI things, no big whoop. So now we can click on show all. And when Velociraptor runs, every single one of the Velociraptor clients that shows up will get its own client ID. That's a unique identifier for that specific client across all the different servers. It generates that unique ID, but you can also see the host name of that system as well. If you click on that particular system, it'll give you some additional details about that computer. And we have the ability to actually run commands on that computer system. So I can fire up command prompt and I can do netstat minus naob, and then I can launch, and it takes a couple of seconds for it to run. You can see it's processing the data on the right-hand side, and I can click the little eye icon, and then it opens up all the processes running on that particular computer system. Now, that is really cool. Like, you can run those individual commands on individual systems, or you can run it on multiple systems all in one shot, right? If we want to do a targeted hunt across multiple different computer systems, we can click on the little like crosshair. We're going to create a new hunt. I'm going to call it class. And then we're going to select what are the artifacts that we want to pull off of that system. There's a bunch of them that you can choose to run on. I don't know. You can kind of choose whatever one you want to do. I usually just do generic PS tree for the sake of this class. Oh, we just got somebody that just passed the Security Plus. Well done. Well done. Congratulations. Round of applause for them. That is good news. So I'm going to run PS tree, configure the parameters, specify the resources. You can review. This is the actual code that is being sent, which is really great and actually setting it up. And then you can click launch. And we select it, push play, and it's going to run this particular hunt. You can see on the right-hand side that it's starting to send that data back and forth between the client, which is of course running on itself. And now we can eventually see the data coming back in on this particular computer system. So in a little bit, it'll come back and you can see that the actual files show up. It says it's still running. It takes a few moments for it to actually load, but you'll be able to download the full download of the files. But oh, there we go. It just loaded. So now I can download, and then I can open up the results of the PS tree command, and I can just open that up with WinWord. And there's the results of PS tree. Now, this is in a format that allows you to upload this into some type of like, if you want to put it in a data cluster, you can upload it into a database. There's a number of ways that you can pull that data and you can query it, and then you can do analysis on it as well. We've had webcasts where we've been talked about Velociraptor. I know that Derek Banks has done some webcasts on this in the past, which is pretty cool. So these are the functionality points that you should have in an EDR. An EDR should have the capability to stop malware, but the ability to actually go through and drill down and, select artifacts, pull down the audit logs, allowing you to, check the state of different systems and what do we got here from the configs? I don't know, client artifacts. I like using the hunt, pulling it all down in one shot. And then the other one that's my favorite is the ability for us to actually query all of the systems with individual commands. So you can select all of them. You can select none of them, pull back all the results, do analysis. All of this is stuff that you should have set up in your EDR. All right, so play around with that. Like I said, it's free. They have their own training. I think their training is pretty phenomenal. I'm going to shut down my Velociraptor instance. And I'm going to kind of set the stage for vulnerability management. And then we're going to take a 10-minute break. And then we're going to walk through vulnerability management. And then we're actually going to close today out with kind of you guys doing a lab and doing Ask Me Anything. The lab is pretty straightforward to kick up and do web vulnerability analysis. So we'll talk about how we do vulnerability analysis in the right way and the wrong way. And then I'm going to kick you guys out to where you're playing with Zed Attack Proxy to look at how you can do vulnerability analysis out there as well. And then Zach, are you present? I don't know if Zach is here. I know Zach is probably listening. And I do have you're not going to take the certification exam right now today. You can take it anytime that you want to. But Zach has created instructions for you all to access the certification, and we'll talk about that. Actually, is it okay? Like, are you guys okay? We just did a long lab. Do you just kind of get to the point where we work all of that in? Is it okay if we work over the 10-minute break? Or does anybody really need to go potty right now? All right, let's kick through this so we can get to the lab and then we can get you all set up in the certification because I'm super excited to see you all jumping in. All right, so by and large, vulnerability management is pretty much the exact same thing as it was 10 years ago. You run a scan, you check for vulnerabilities, and you fix those vulnerabilities. Now, the vendors will expend a tremendous amount of time and effort trying desperately to convince you that they're doing something brand spanking new that no one else has ever done and it's proprietary and it's magical. And honestly, most of the time they're not, right? You run an external scan, comes back and tells you what the vulnerabilities are, and then you fix those vulnerabilities. And that's kind of it. Now, there's a great quote by Henry Ford, amazing industrialist and very well-known and renowned racist. But he had a great quote. And basically, people are asking me, how much do you listen to what your customers ask for? And he said, if I was going to just, do what my customers asked me to do, I would have built a faster horse. And I think that that's happened quite a bit in vulnerability management. A lot of people basically are like, well, we want you to prioritize what the vulnerabilities are that we should be working with. You guys didn't know that? You guys didn't know that? Like people are just like shocked by that? Oh, you guys got to do some research. Yeah, he was a piece of work. No, we knew. So yeah, you can have any color you want of a car as long as it's black. Well, but we aren't going to get into that too much. But yeah, he was, he was right up there. So with vulnerability prioritization, that's what a lot of vulnerability management vendors try to do, because when people complain, they're constantly saying, yeah, well, we want you to look at all these thousands of vulnerabilities and we want you to tell us which one we're going to be hacked with, and then we'll fix that one. And it's like, so let me get this straight. You want me to look into the future, precog, minority report style, and you want me to tell you which one's going to hack you, and then you want to fix it. And of course, the customers are like, yeah, that's what I want you to do. And the vendors are like, okay. And then you hear all kinds of things like, here's a whole bunch of different vulnerabilities that have been hitting your market vertical, and CISA's top 100 vulnerabilities, and all of God, it just gets really stupid. And that's dumb. Don't do it that way. That's just really super bad. So don't do that. So we're going to talk about how you deal with vulnerabilities the right way. And we're going to talk about how you deal with it the wrong way. And the reason why we really want to focus on this is because if you focus on doing it the wrong way, you develop these monster blind spots. Like this one would be like an informational. No one would ever touch or look at informationals. But BHIS, when we're testing, we find these things all the time. So you can look at all the telnet banners that come back from a Nessus report. And it'll say like login, router. And you're kind of playing the game at that point of which of these things is not like the other, which of these things doesn't belong. Yeah, what does it mean if I see router greater than? And someone said, but it's behind a firewall, so it's safe. No, we see this all the time on the outside of environments. Like it just comes back and it's like, yeah. So is there any authentication with that router? No, none. Zero. You literally just telnet to it and you can take over their router. And this isn't informational. And for some companies, it'll sit like that for years and it won't actually be addressed. So how in the hell do you address these things properly? So very few organizations actually address the low or informational issues at all. So here's the wrong way. And I say that this approach is almost always the wrong way. I'm just going to stick with always. Yeah, let's go with always the wrong way. Many organizations address vulnerabilities by IP address. So they'll take a vulnerability report, they break it up by IP address, and they basically say, here's what the scanner found for vulnerabilities in your IP. And here's the scanner that found the vulnerabilities in your IP. Here's the scanner vulnerability for your IP. And literally, you end up with this weird math that's happening. Let's say that there's 1,000 IP addresses, and the automated vulnerability scanner finds roughly about, let's say on average, 25 vulnerabilities per IP. Some are more, some are less. That means there's 25,000 issues to address. And I've worked with teams that have nervous breakdowns where they're just like, oh my God, we have 25,000 freaking vulnerabilities to deal with. And they just seize, right? They're like, we've got to go through all of these, got it, heroin. Yeah, heroin might actually help that. Let's just kind of figure out how to break this up across everybody. And if we all pull together as a team, we'll get through it. The closest kind of nightmarish scenario is like what happened with the CrowdStrike thing where it nuked the systems and you had to physically go to each system and fix it. And it took like 4 minutes per system to do that. Like that's bad, right? That kind of like bespoke one at a time way of dealing things is just never ever a good idea. So the key point on this is you need to group your vulnerabilities by the vulnerability ID, not by IP address. So let me do that math again. So stop focusing on IP addresses and ranges, and instead focus on the vulnerability. All right. So instead of having 25,000 vulnerabilities, you probably only have a few hundred vulnerabilities that are repeated on multiple different systems. You may have SSL vulnerabilities that repeat on 100 computers. You may have like the telnet vulnerability. You may have telnet running on a couple of hundred systems, and you can quickly scroll through the results to look for the ones that don't have authentication banners installed on them, right? So you can do that. You can do that easily. And to give you an idea of what this does for scale of time, I'm IONS faculty. I think I talked about this on day one, but IONS does expert decision support. And there's a whole bunch of amazing pen testing firms that are part of IONS. And the companies that are part of IONS faculty, number of us do very large assessments, and BHIS in particular, we can scan and deal with 1 million IP addresses, live IP addresses, not range of 1 million IP addresses, but live systems. And we can have 2 testers go through all vulnerabilities, including the lows and informationals, and we can knock that out in 3 weeks. And the customer that is that large that we do that with, there are not many customers that have IP ranges that big. They basically, the first time we did it, we found hundreds of vulnerabilities. There was a lot of very critical vulnerabilities. And they said, hey, we had a big 5 consulting firm. They came in with 5 consultants for a month and a half, and they didn't find these vulnerabilities. That's because they were doing it the old school way, by IP address, right? That's just wrong. Sort it by the plugin ID. Sort it by the vulnerability, and then find a way with Ansible, Puppet, Chef, SCCM, use an automated framework to address those vulnerabilities through things like group policy and automation. So you're dealing with them all in one shot instead of one system by itself. And honestly, if we're looking at something like the MITRE ATT&CK technique matrix, a lot of the MITRE ATT&CK technique matrix, when we're looking at externally exploitable vulnerabilities, it's 2 boxes. That's it. So if you're trying to look at the totality of information security, you're really looking at a very small piece of the puzzle. So the other thing that you can do is you can start looking at like threat emulation. And we don't have that section in this class anymore. It's now in the Intro to Security class. But there's tools out there like Atomic Red Team. And some of the people were asking, what if I want to go deeper and I want to do more labs and I want to go further? If I go back to the navigation menu, the labs for Intro to SOC, Intro to Security, all of those labs are available to all of you for free. right? You can go through and you can run all of these labs. You can do all of them. I'm updating the cyber deception labs to work in the new environment. So I'm working on that now. But all of these labs right here, you can keep going. And if any of these things and these concepts seem hazy to you, you can redo these labs. In fact, there is, and in fact, an atomic red team lab where you can learn about atomic red team right here. Right. So you have other things that you can get back into as well. All right. So let's talk about web apps, and then we're going to do a lab, and then we're going to do the Ask Me Anything and get you all set up in the certification in the last 30 minutes of the class. So vulnerability analysis with a like scanner like Nessus does a good job. Okay. Does a good job, but it does not do a real good job on web application vulnerabilities. So I kind of handle web application vulnerabilities separate from vulnerability management in this course because you use different tools and you use different skill sets. So you have this problem statement. How can we quickly secure our apps? Training is super expensive, right? Like if we're talking about $10,000 for 1 week worth of training, that is not attainable by most organizations out there. So that's out of the question for most organizations. Tools can be expensive. They don't have to be. What is the current price of Suite Pro? That's what we use at BHIS. And Zed Attack Proxy is free. So there are tools out there that are free. Burp is $500. There are other tools out there like commercial web app scanners that are $20,000, $30,000. So expensive. And when you're looking at software development life cycles, especially for things in the cloud, like you're standing up instances of software in Amazon or in Azure, you have these continuous builds, continuous improvement, and many times security is just bolted on at the end. This is something I'm going to talk about in my webcast that starts here in less than an hour, where you see the same problem showing up again and again and again, where security is often bolted on at the end. The developers get done building an app and then they call you up and they're like, yeah, we need some security in this. Then you show up and find tons of vulnerabilities and they're basically like, well, that's just horrible. We can't have those vulnerabilities. Now we're going to have to rewrite large sections of the app. It's not my problem, right? Like if somebody went through the effort to code an application and they coded it with a bunch of vulnerabilities, they have me test it 1 week before it goes live. My job is to find vulnerabilities, right? So you really want to make sure that continuous testing is done at the beginning, throughout, and the end. And yes, this applies to SOC analysts. The reason why this applies to SOC analysts is because vulnerability management is many times moved into the security operations center. So you need to be doing this not just with a vulnerability scanner, but also with good web application security testing. But I get this pushback that security is hard, right? It's annual, $499 or $449 per year is burp. It's not really all that hard. I think that a lot of people in information security are kind of like NoFX. It's my job to keep InfoSec elite. We tend to go out of our way to try to make hacking and all this stuff look like some kind of black magic to confuse people. And the reality is just patch your stuff. If you run a web app scanner and it finds cross-site scripting and SQL injection, fix it. Like, stick with these basic things. And the next class is really based on like the 10 things, like triage things that you should do if everything is burning down. And a tremendous amount of computer security is the Pareto principle. It's the 80-20 rule. So where and when should we actually test, right? Many of the tools we talk about are so easy, they should be used all the time, right? Nightly, if possible, weekly at a minimum. And we also recommend an environment that you have people rotate around who's doing the scanning and the testing. And the reason why we recommend that is because in many organizations, the person that does security scanning is usually one of two people. It's either the most security person who's hoarding all of the security scanning for themselves, or they're farming it out to the most junior intern in the company, right? That's just what they do. Instead, this should be something that's rotating around through the entire team to get around things like FedEx said, fatigue, right? What should we test for? Things that can be easily detected with an automated tool, which is that 80% of the vulnerabilities are super, super easy. Got cross-site scripting, SQL injection, command injection, misconfigurations. That's 80 to 85% of the vulnerabilities that you're going to encounter. Do the tools cover everything? Hell no, right? And that's where like having a good human tester that understands context is really important, because pen testing firms like Black Hills Information Security, we don't want to find the same vulnerabilities again and again and again, like cross-site scripting. We want to focus on business logic errors, permission errors, things that are missed by the vulnerability scanners that are out there. We want to focus on those things. So yeah, these do require manual level testing. Tons of tools out there. We use Burp Suite Pro because it's cheap. But if you're just getting started with Zed Attack Proxy costs you nothing, not a dime. Neither does Nikto. Neither does W3F. If you want to use that one, it's getting kind of long in the tooth there. And if you know how to use these tools properly, they can go toe to toe with many of the different tools that cost $20,000 out there as well. So we're focusing on Zap. It's free from OWASP. It's very similar to Burp. It's free. Has a strong development core. It's also free. Has the ability to intercept and modify requests. It's $0. And it has the ability to full-on automated testing. And did we mention it doesn't cost anything? It's no longer at OWASP. They've moved it over to another site. If you just do a search for Zed Attack Proxy, it'll take you to the site where it's being hosted. And that brings us to our last lab of the day. So let's go ahead and let's jump into the web testing lab right here. Web testing. So web testing, you're going to open up your Kali system. You're going to become root. You're going to CD into the web testing directory. You're going to get your Linux IP address. You're going to fire up damn small vulnerable web app. This is a web app that is really small, has tons of vulnerabilities for tools like Zed Attack Proxy to chew on and get in. You're then going to start Zed Attack Proxy. You're going to kick off an automated scan against your Linux IP address, which will be different than mine. And then you're going to watch the results come through. This is easy. Like, this shouldn't be hard. Like, everybody should be doing this all of the time. So with that, let's get rolling with the lab. We're going to give you about 15 minutes. I'm going to get on the phone with Zach. When we come back, Zach is going to kind of explain the new certification, and him and I will work together. And then I'm going to have to jump off and go right to a webcast that you all should come to, by the way. You all should come to the webcast where I rant even more. But I do have something really cool that just came in the mail for me today. I have a mini KVM toolkit. I'm so excited about this mini KVM toolkit. What it is a KVM that turns your computer into the keyboard video mouse. So instead of actually having a KVM to a keyboard video and mouse, you can plug it in with just a USB and an HDMI cable, and it makes your standalone notebook computer be the KVM itself. So super excited. You got your flipper? I got my flipper. We're flipper buddies. All right, everybody, let's get this lab. Let's get this lab. Talk to you all later. 15 minutes, everyone. Boom, back. Got Zach's coming in. We're going to kill some of the music. So Zach has been working on this with Roman. We've had a number of people that have been working on this for quite a bit. And I think it's important for Zach and I to kind of set the stage. We're going to tag team it WWF style. I hate multiple choice tests. I cannot stress like my deep-seated hatred in multiple choice tests and computer security, right? And I'm going to kind of talk about it a little bit, and then I'm going to let Zach take over. I have seen zero correlation between someone's ability to do the job and passing a multiple choice test. Like, I've seen tons of people with tons of SAN certs and they're incapable of doing anything. I've seen people with CISSPs and they have a common language, and I think that that's valuable. But I have people all the time that are like, I'm an expert. I've got a CIS. No. No. But if you have things that are actually hands-on, if you're looking like OSCP or AST, Meta CTF cyber ranges, that tends to be a much better indicator of someone's ability to do work. Okay. Zach, do you have anything you want to add to that? Because I know you feel the same way I do about that, but I'd like to get your take as well.
I mean, I'm sure you and I could just go back and forth for hours on where we feel the certification industry is, where training the industry is as a whole, right?
Hmm.
Um, I agree with everything that you're saying, which is why like working on this has been such a wild journey with you, just knowing how we've both felt about multiple choice questions and how we've both been very vocal about that, right? Because I've said for years, like there's just we just don't have the right ways to validate skills with potential um employees. And it's been very difficult with that. It's been very difficult to train people that on those skills and what they actually need, right? And
Yeah.
the actual skills that they need, right? Like the actual hands-on information methodologies, tools, techniques that they need to be successful on the job. And I
Yeah.
feel like the certification industry has done a terrible job at helping validate those skills, right? Like it just they're lacking, they're behind.
So that brings us to today. Um, I hate multiple choice test questions, and we created a multiple choice certification.
Well, in
Yeah,
part, in,
kind of, right?
in part. But
So this is
why would you say what would you say is the valuable part of the multiple choice aspect of this? Before I think you go further, right? Because I feel like that's kind of a breakdown that needs to happen.
so one of the things about this is I have on my quote for social media and stuff is I will light the way by the bridges I burn. And one of the things I want to do is it's like there's so many organizations that we talk to that want to have some type of multiple choice certification, certificate. Like you go through and you went through ACE-T and do we have a certification? Do we have a certification? Do you have a multiple choice certification? The industry is so completely wrapped up in certifications that we can't get away from it. So what Zach and I originally started talking about when we started discussing this, and the idea that we came up with was twofold. The first thing is come up with a multiple choice certification that is accessible financially to everyone. And Zach's going to kind of walk you through how to get there. This is the pay what you can or pay it forward certification. So we're not charging $500. We're not going to charge $800. We're not going to charge $1,000. If you want to pay $5, pay $5. And there's this quote that you have all the time. It's like people value things exactly as much as they pay for them. And I guess that that's somewhat true. But this is kind of one of the ways that we can take a shot at the certification industry by trying to create an entry level cert that is affordable and accessible to absolutely everybody in this industry, regardless of where you're coming from. And that, in and of itself, is really, really kind of the first stop for this. Yeah, it is different than the payment for this course. And once again, you can pay $0 for this course. You do have to pay $5 for the certification because when I'm giving away the course, I'm giving away my time and I'm giving away my money, or BHIS's Tribe of Businesses money. With Meta CTF, this is Roman, this is other people. We need to get some funds to actually cover this. So where you guys are FedEx, you're going to be the first ones. This is not this is not something that we have ran.
This is
So that's number
alpha.
one. Yeah, you're an alpha. So number one, we're launching this cert to make it something that is financially accessible to absolutely everyone. And number two, and I would argue more importantly, is the submission. Zach, do you want to
Wait,
talk a
wait.
little bit about the
Uh,
submission, please? Oh, go
well,
ahead.
even before we get there, I just want to kind of talk a little bit more about the multiple choice aspect of this because Um, I think what we lack to mention here is what really sets, I think, us apart with where we're coming at from this is the training that you actually have to go through before you go through that multiple choice exam, right?
Yeah.
The training that we're providing is really geared to be, and we stress these words so much: practical, hands-on, realistic. They're really teaching you everything that you need to know to be effective in the job. That's the training. So, the training consists of John's Pay What You Can classes. So when you go through those classes, for free or for whatever you're willing to pay forward for those, right? you're gaining the knowledge that you need to be successful to go through the multiple choice exam there, right? So
Mhm.
it's that training, the knowledge that you're gaining there, and helping validate that through that our exam, right? Because we know that our training is getting you prepared for that real world. So the multiple
Mhm.
choice questions, well, yes, we all know that they suck and we hate them, but at least we're using that as a validation mechanism, saying, hey, like you went through this training that is teaching you really what you need to know to be effective, and we can validate that through you hitting, I think it's like 70% of the questions on the 100 questions that you'll go through.
Yeah.
So that's, I just want to highlight that, right?
Yep.
Because the training is, as you all know and have experienced the last 4 days, just phenomenal, right? And it's very hands-on. Once you do that multiple choice question, then before you even get to, I think, the most important part of this, right? Um, the next part, after you complete the 100 choice multiple choice question, you go through and we'll have 10 different challenges from the anti-siphon cyber range that you can choose from. You have to complete 5 of those challenges. So those are 5 CTF challenges that you have to complete start to finish. Once you complete those challenges, then I think this is the exciting part. This is what really sets it apart, is then you have to take and write a report based off of 2 of those challenges out of the 5 that you've completed. So
Yep.
this is where things are really going to, set you apart from everybody else. And this is what we're trying to do to really make it, I think, a change and impact in the industry is when you submit these reports, they get added to your profile within MetaCTF, and we'll get that integrated with anti-siphon as well. That's going to be public. That's going to be viewable to everybody. So that's potential employers as well. So when you look at this report writing aspect of this entire exam, that is the most critical, crucial part of it all, because that's where you and everybody gets to see and validate, what you are learning. You get to walk people through and explain, what you found, vulnerabilities, how, that whole process. It's your chance to really provide your unique perspective into the things that you've learned through this entire exam process, through your learning process here. And that's, this is a way that employers will help really look at you to validate your skills across a broad spectrum. So not just, the technical skills, not, you're getting hands-on, the multiple choice question aspect of it that's helping validate that. It's it's the report writing.
So
There's go ahead. Yeah, John. Sorry.
yeah, Henry Joseph just asked a question. Do we have an option to opt out? Absolutely. Don't opt in. I'm not forcing anybody to do this. It's not something that you have to do. I'm not making people do things. It's completely up to you if you want to approach it or not. We just want to make it so it's as cheap and affordable as it possibly can. Now, the big question that I've been getting a lot is what uh, is this class enough to pass the cert? This cert is designed around 2 classes, this one and the Intro to Security class. The Intro to Security class is also available as a recording on YouTube, right? And this goes back to what Zach and I are talking about. Like, if you're like, oh my gosh, I got to wait another 2 months for class. No, you don't. The recordings of the live classes for Intro to SOC Core Skills and Intro to Security are available for free on YouTube. So if you want to roll through all of this and you just want to hit both the classes and then go for the cert, you go for it. Do you have to sign up for the day? No, nope, you don't have to sign up today. Zach's going to show you how to sign up, and you can do it whenever you want. All right. You can do it at your leisure. It's going to be available to you. But like I said, we're trying to make this as accessible as possible, and we're trying to get it away. You get 5 practice attempts. Somebody was asking, do we get a practice exam? You get 5 attempts on that as well. So, Zach, sorry to interrupt. We had some questions, wanted to get those here. But yeah, the Intro to Security class is out on YouTube. The Intro to SOC Core Skills is out on YouTube. The certification is Pay It Forward. And you can pay $5, you can pay $100, you can pay $25. I just, we're trying to get as many people into this industry as we can. All right, go ahead, Zach.
Awesome. Yeah. No, so just put in the Discord channel. You can register. So I put the link there where y'all can register. And then there is a PDF document in the resources channel that I also pasted there. So you can follow that PDF, which will walk you through step by step what you need to do to get registered on the MetaCTF platform and get started with the exam. So if y'all have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Happy to help. MetaCTF will be available, but we've went through this process a couple times today, and everything should be good to go. I'm very excited for it. I really see this as a way that we can help really the industry, and I think that's what we're all about. We really want to help people and make an impact, see more people be successful. And part of that outside of the training is looking at ways that we can help certify the industry and the actual skills they need to be successful. And I really cannot emphasize that enough, just based on comparisons with other, certifications and training that is out there. I think you've all experienced, especially these last 4 days, as you've gone through John's class. You're very hands-on with everything. It is very much focused on getting you hands-on with what you need to be, successful in this field. That's one thing that it makes me very proud and excited to be working here with everybody from anti-siphon training, is that we're all taking, the knowledge that we're learning from, John, like in day to day, like as a pen tester, you're taking information that you're learning from, our SOC analysts, and you're saying, okay, here's what you need to know. Here's what we're seeing. Here's how you can do these things. This is how you become successful in this field. And I think that's really, it's much different than what you see from college, from other training that's out there. And that just, it just makes me so excited that we get to do this and have this impact on the industry. So thank you, John, for doing this. I've been seeing people, thank you, John, you're the best. You are, man. It's truly great to see, this impact that you're having on the industry, and us as an entire, organization really trying to make a change so that we can really help make things more secure. As cheesy as that sounds, but that's the goal.
All right.
I'll
So
get
we
that
got a
error over
couple.
to Meta.
Yeah, we'll get that over to Meta. I want to kind of do the closing ceremony speech. Kind of taking this, like Zach said, we want to change the industry for the better. And I said, and I'm going to talk about it on the webcast here in a little bit. I believe that education is the solution to all of our problems, right? And I want to talk about like gates, and I want to talk about, we discuss this industry and how we get people into this industry. And one of the things that we discuss all the time is what are the people that are having the most difficulty getting into this industry? And I grew up, and Zach grew up. We grew up in, like, we'll put it nicely, Zach, blue collar families, right? We'll make that as nice as we possibly can, right? But I'll be a little bit more blunt. I remember whenever my dad was deployed over to South Korea, we were poor. Like, we were in a house that was really, really, really super small. The only heat we had was a wood fireplace. And I remember my mom being lunch lady, and the food that we would get was literally the leftover food from the lunches that she served students at school. And I remember duct taping my shoes to kind of hold my shoes together. And that that experience, and the experience like growing up where I grew up, how I grew up, seeing the people that were in my community really kind of set me to the point where I get super pissed off where people look at poor people and they say, "Oh, you're poor because you're dumb, or you're poor because you're not, doing the right decisions." And granted, life decisions happen to all of us, right? We all make mistakes. And for some of us, we can recover from those mistakes. For some of us, we can't recover from those mistakes. And when we're looking at what is the barrier to entry to getting into a good job in computer security, we talk about gates that exist for people based on religion, sex, race, ethnicity, whatever it is. And ultimately, it can be boiled all of those things away, and it can be boiled down to money. And that's it. You can't get into security unless you have a degree. You can't get into security unless you have an expensive certification. And that money barrier is something that's absolutely something that stops a lot of people from getting into this industry. So when we started this whole endeavor a long time ago, we wanted to not have like, giving out, free seats to different groups of people. We wanted to basically attack and burn the entire gate down, all of it. And to do that, we decided to open up the training for everybody as a pay what you can model. Okay. I was a SANS instructor for 16, 17 years. And I realized after a while that you cannot fix the problems in information security by trying to charge $8,000 to $10,000 per person. You cannot be a true patriot of your country if you have like a 97% profit margin. You're not going to fix the problems. You're not going to deal with the issues that you have to be able to get the industry where it needs to be by having that type of profit motive and everything around it. And to that end, when we started doing this, we were shocked. I was really, really, really super humbled. When we started out by saying pay what you can with zero as an option, there was a lot of people that said, hey, no one's going to pay for it. And the first time that I taught a pay what you can class during COVID, I made as much money in that one class by people choosing to pay for it as I did instructor fees for an entire year from the SANS Institute. That's amazing. That shows that people are willing to give. That shows that people are willing to share. That shows that people are willing to help other people get into this industry. So to that end, I'm going to call out two groups of people. All right. I'm going to call out two groups of people to recognize the two groups of people. The first group of people that I want to call out are the people that paid for this class. There's no reason for anybody to have paid for this class. You didn't have to. Zero was an option. And there was a number of you that chose to go in and select a different dollar amount and chose to pay, even when you didn't have to pay, to choose to pay to come into this course. And I think that everyone should give a round of applause and thanks, heartfelt thanks, to the people that chose to pay. It means a lot to me. It's what actually keeps all of this running, right? You know, this isn't all fairy dust and dreams. Like, this actually costs money to set these things up. Everyone here has to feed a family, and what we're doing, and the people that pay for this are the people that allow us to keep going and keep going.
They allow everybody else to keep going and going too,
Yep.
though. That's what's most important. I think about those people who are paying and helping, is it is very much a pay forward approach,
Pay it
because
forward.
it helps us, helps everybody attend these classes. So, it allows us as staff to be here, and John, you to be here to teach it, but it allows everybody to participate in those cloud labs. And I really have to give a shout out for that, because that has seemed to go very well this week. So shout out to Meta CTF on that. They did phenomenal
Yep.
getting that up
They
and running for us. So
they changed
good.
our entire game. I won't go into the details, but Meta CTF crushed it. The second group I want to call out are the people that didn't pay. I know a lot of times, and I'm speaking specifically to the people that chose not to pay. I know a lot of times whenever you talk to people, you're guilted. You're basically told, yeah, you're cheap, you're lazy, you're in between jobs because you're variations of a bad person. Or if you chose not to pay, I know what it's like to be in a family where the idea of $25 is a substantial financial decision for somebody to take in a family where a single mom is working 2 to 3 jobs just to keep food on the table and keep the lights on. I know what that's like. I've been there. I grew up there. That's you. You're my people, right? And whenever you're looking at people that are getting by on minimum wage and they're just absolutely crawling, there could be a number of reasons. It could be single moms. It could be, dads that are driving trucks. It could be somebody that went to prison for doing something incredibly stupid. And now their life is completely effed, and their ability to get loans, to ability to ever recover in any way is now completely shot. Whenever you're looking at it, there's a wide variety of ways that you can end up on the bottom. And when you live on the bottom, everyone judges you. Everyone wants to keep you on the bottom. They want to hold you down as much as they possibly can because it makes them feel superior. And I know what that's like. And everything in your life is completely based on hourly wage. How much do you make per hour? What is minimum wage? How many hours do you actually put in? And I cannot tell how much it means to me. The one precious resource that you have to give in the world, the one precious thing that you can do, you chose to be here. You could have taken that time that is most precious to you and you could have spent it with your family. You could have taken that time that is most precious to you and you could have spent it resting and recouping and recovering between a variety of different shifts that you do just to keep yourself going. And the fact that you didn't pay anything doesn't mean that you didn't give anything up to be here. You absolutely did give something up to be here. And I think everybody here owes the people that didn't pay, that chose to give their most precious resource of time, a round of applause as well to be here. And that is something that means a tremendous amount to us, because the financial aspect, that keeps us going financially, that keeps the lights on. But what lights us and gets us up in the morning to keep pushing and keep moving forward in this industry are those of you that are taking advantage of this class, and then you're getting jobs in this industry, and you're talking to Zach, and you're talking to me, and you're saying, I now have a job where I'm making 75, 80, 100, $120,000 with health benefits. I have people that come up to me and say, my kid was diagnosed with cancer, and because of this class and the job that I got, I had full health insurance to help my kid get through the cancer and get the treatments that they needed. I have talked to people that have worked 2 to 3 jobs that now have a great job. I love it when people come up to our conferences, Zach, and they say, hey, just it's kind of weird. My employer paid for everything for me to be here. It's like, welcome to our world. That is what sustains us in a way that has nothing to do with dollars and cents, because we know what that's like. We know how hard it is. We know how hard it is to be judged. We know how hard it is to work as incredibly hard as so many of you actually do, and not having a goddamn chance to get off the bottom. So we're here. We've got certifications, we've got training, we're doing it pay what you can, because we desperately want to help you all get as far as you can in your careers, because we're getting our asses kicked in cybersecurity. We need good people on the front lines. And I know finding a job is hard, but you need to be going through these classes, through these certifications, taking advantage of every free resource that you got, because that perfect job is out there and you need to be ready for it when it pops. And we've tried to give you as much as we possibly can to try to get you to that point so you are ready. So with that, I want to say thank you very much to absolutely everybody. We have a webcast starting, Zach, in 6 minutes, y'all. 6 minutes. And I can't wait to see you all in that next webcast. Thank you so much, everybody. And I hope to see you in the next 6 minutes. Otherwise, I will see you in a class real soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you all, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. Hope you learned a lot throughout these last few days. If you all have any feedback that you would like to share with us, I am always open to that. You can reach out to me directly if you would like. Reach out to us via email, support@anti-training.com. We'd love to hear from you all. You should be getting your certificates of completion. Believe it starts tomorrow. We start sending those out. It's usually about a 24-hour turnaround where we get those sent out. So if you are expecting that and you don't get it by tomorrow evening or so, definitely reach out. But you should be getting those provided you did register for today's class. But I'm going to give you all a couple minutes to get over to John's webcast if you'd like. Again, thank you all seriously so much for being here. We really mean that from the bottom of our hearts. Y'all sharing your time with us is just fantastic. We love seeing you here. And any other ways to reach out to me? Sorry, yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. That's probably like the best platform to reach out to me. But otherwise, Discord, email. Yeah, we're here to help, and we hope to see y'all soon and another Pay What You Can class. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, and see you in the next webcast.